The Bering Sea doesn't care about your plans. Out here, nature is the only authority, and it can turn on you in an instant. Out here, 260 miles from Dutch Harbor, only the mission matters. Finish king crab season, no matter what. For the Time Bandit crew, this was the last, hardest trip of the year, and the stakes had never been higher. The isolation is total. There's no help coming if things go wrong. The holds were nearly full, but nearly doesn't pay the bills. Every crab counts, and every hour spent on deck is a gamble. A massive storm was closing in, a black blot on the charts, promising hurricane-force winds and waves that could swallow a boat whole. Captain Jonathan Hillstrand knew it was a race. Get the crab, get out, or risk everything. Stay too long, and you gamble with your life. Leave too soon, and you go home broke. The pressure was relentless, and every decision weighed heavy on the captain's mind. The crew was exhausted, but the end was in sight. Adrenaline replaced fatigue. The sea was already choppy, a warning of what was coming. Each man pushed through the pain, driven by the promise of a payday and the hope of making it home. Every man knew the stakes. This was about survival, not just a paycheck. The Time Bandit groaned under the pressure, its steel hull a fortress and a legacy. The boat itself seemed to come alive, creaking and shuddering as it faced the fury of the sea. Every scar on the boat told a story of past battles. Now, as the wind picked up and the sky darkened, the old boat faced one more challenge. The crew trusted her, knowing she'd carry generations through storms just like this. It had to carry its crew through this final frantic harvest and deliver them home. The sea was throwing down a challenge, and the Time Bandit was ready to answer. In the Bering Sea, survival is never guaranteed. But for these fishermen, turning back was never an option. Every captain has a secret spot, guarded more fiercely than gold. These are places marked on battered charts, whispered about in the galley, and trusted only in the most desperate moments. With the storm closing in, Captain Jonathan played his final card. The wind howled and the waves crashed, but he knew this was his only shot. No time for guessing. They needed a sure thing. The crew was exhausted, nerves frayed, and the clock was ticking down on their season. He steered the Time Bandit to his secret ground, hoping it was loaded with king crab. The coordinates were burned into his memory, a place he'd only risk when everything was on the line. If he was wrong, they'd lose hours they didn't have. The margin for error was razor thin, and the sea showed no mercy for mistakes. But if he was right, they could finish in a single run. The difference between triumph and defeat was just a few steel pots away. The pressure was immense. The crew's lives and the season's success rested on his call. Every man on deck felt the weight of that decision. They needed at least 21 crabs per pot to make quota. Anything less, and the season would slip through their fingers. The Bering Sea is fickle. A gold mine one year, barren the next. Luck and skill both mattered, but sometimes it came down to a prayer. As the crew readied the deck, tension was thick. Every movement was deliberate, every glance exchanged, loaded with hope and anxiety. The first buoy was hooked, the line spooled in, and every eye was on the water. Hearts pounded as the pot broke the surface. This was the moment of truth, jubilation or disappointment. The next few seconds would decide their fate. The fate of their season hung on that rising steel cage. Would it be heavy with crab, or heartbreakingly empty? The whole crew held their breath, waiting for the verdict. In that instant, time seemed to stand still on the Bering Sea. The first pot broke the surface, overflowing with crab. It was a sight every fisherman dreams of, claws and shells tumbling over the rim, a living treasure chest from the deep. For a moment, time seemed to pause as the crew realized what they'd pulled up. Cheers erupted across the deck. The captain's gamble had paid off, and the tension that had gripped the crew melted away in an instant. The crew sprang into action, sorting and measuring at lightning speed. Every hand moved with practiced precision. Each crab counted and checked. the rhythm of their work echoing the pounding of their hearts. 45 crabs in the first pot, more than double what they needed. The numbers were almost too good to believe, but the evidence was right there, crawling across the deck. The next pot, 67. Spirits soared even higher, laughter and shouts echoing over the waves. Fatigue vanished, replaced by adrenaline. The exhaustion of long hours and rough seas was forgotten in the rush of success. Pot after pot came up heavy, 39, 54, 65. Each haul was a victory, each number a step closer to their goal. The deck was a sea of red gold, the crabs piling higher with every passing minute. Captain Jonathan watched from the wheelhouse, a rare smile on his face. He knew these moments were hard-won, the result of risk and experience. The numbers were phenomenal, the pressure eased with every haul. The crew could finally breathe, if only for a moment. They could finish faster, pulling fewer pots as the storm closed in. Every minute saved was a minute closer to safety. The crew worked like a machine, years of experience binding them together. Each man knew his role, and together they moved as one. The hold filled fast. Heading home was now a real possibility. The promise of a full hold was becoming reality with every crab loaded below. They'd won the first battle. Now they just had to get the crab on board before the sea took it back. Every second counted as the waves grew higher. The storm was still coming, but now they had a fighting chance. Determination set in their faces as they braced for what was next. The promise of home was no longer a dream. It was within reach, shining just beyond the horizon, as the crew pressed on with hope and grit. Just as things were going right, the Bering Sea threw a curveball. The boat lurched, a sickening vibration ran through the hull. They were tangled in another boat's gear, a fisherman's nightmare. Worse, a line was sucked into the propeller. The crew suspected it was the wizard's gear. Competition turned dangerous. The Time Bandit was now tethered to the sea floor, a sitting duck with a storm coming. Freeing the boat was urgent. A tangled prop could be catastrophic. The crew worked frantically, using the crane to lift the rogue pot clear. One wrong move could snap a line or damage the boat. Miraculously, they freed the line without sending a diver into the freezing water. Relief swept the crew. They dodged a bullet, but they'd lost precious time and the storm was closer. The crisis was a stark reminder. Out here, things can go wrong in an instant. The sea always has another challenge waiting. With the tangle behind them, the crew pushed harder. The storm was now a physical presence. Wind howled, seas built, and the deck became a rolling, icy hazard. Every step was a risk, every pot a battle. 13 pots left, but the final stretch was the most dangerous. Crab counts started to drop. 25, 24, then just 13. Anxiety grew. Was their hot streak over? They still averaged above quota, but every low count stung. The crew shouted numbers to the wheelhouse, voices barely heard over the storm. Each crab was a small victory, another step closer to home. Hope and disappointment traded places with every haul. The finish line was in sight, but the storm was at their heels. It was a race against time and nature. In the heart of the storm, the crew's true strength showed. Teamwork was everything. Each man trusted the others with his life. When waves crashed over the bow, they moved as one, steadying each other. The physical toll was immense, but quitting wasn't an option. They pushed through pain and exhaustion, driven by pride and the promise of home. As the deck tilted, crabs slid and men scrambled to catch them. It was chaos, but they worked together, perfectly coordinated. This was more than a job. It was survival, and a testament to what a dedicated team can do. Against the sea's fury, they stood united. 3 pots left. The call cut through the storm, giving the crew a final surge. The next pot, over 50 keepers, a huge morale boost. They were set to surpass their quota. The second to last pot was sorted. Then only one remained, the final pot of the season. Weeks of labor, danger, and hope in one steel cage. It broke the surface, full of crab. With the last crab in the tank, the crew cheered. They'd done it. Captain Jonathan gave the order. "We're heading home!" Relief and triumph swept the boat. They'd beaten the storm, filled their holds, and survived. The hardest part was over, or so they thought. One last obstacle still lay ahead. The journey home meant facing False Pass, a notorious narrow shortcut. With a storm raging, it was a death trap unless timed perfectly at slack tide. Captain Jonathan raced the tide, pushing the time bandit to the pass at the precise moment. The entrance was a maelstrom, waves breaking, wind shrieking. He had to choose, wait in open water or thread the needle through chaos. The crew gathered in the galley, tension thick. They trusted their captain, but the sea was unforgiving. As the time bandit lined up and began its run, every man held his breath. The next few minutes would decide everything. Triumph or tragedy hung in the balance. As Captain Jonathan navigated False Pass, the crew finally paused. For the first time in weeks, they reflected on what they'd endured. One young crewman stared at a photo of his son. Missing family was the hidden cost of this life. Pride and sacrifice go hand in hand for fishermen. They do it for the money, but also for the legacy and the challenge. As the time bandit cleared the pass, relief and laughter filled the boat. The season was truly over. Now it was just miles to home. Simple things. A hot shower, a real meal, a loved one's embrace were all that mattered. They'd survived the storm, trusted each other, and brought home the prize. For these men, it's more than a job. It's a way of life, and a victory earned at the edge of the world.